There is a particular kind of tiredness that lives in your hands tonight, a weariness that has settled deep into the tendons and the small muscles of your fingers, even though you may not have lifted anything heavy today. It is not the fatigue of physical labor, not the honest ache that follows moving stones or kneading bread or tending soil in the late afternoon light. This is something subtler and older, something that has been building quietly for so long that you have almost forgotten what it feels like to live without it. You have been gripping, holding, clenching, reaching, managing, arranging, and you have been doing it for so long now that your hands have forgotten they were ever meant to open, ever designed to simply rest at your sides without reaching for the next thing that needs to be held in place. Take a breath now, slowly, as though you were drawing the night air through a long, cool hallway that stretches out before you into the darkness. Let it fill the lowest part of your lungs first, the way water fills a glass from the bottom up, patient and unhurried, and then let it leave just as slowly, carrying with it whatever small weight it can. You do not need to force anything out tonight, not the tension in your jaw or the tightness across the bridge of your shoulders or the dull knot that has been sitting between your shoulder blades since sometime around mid-morning. Simply breathe and let the breath do what it has always known how to do without your supervision or your careful management, without you holding the reins with those tired, faithful hands. You came here tonight because something in you recognized it was time, even if the rest of your mind is still running through lists and contingencies and all the things that could go wrong between now and morning. That part of you, the one still scanning for threats and forgotten obligations and loose threads that might unravel while you sleep, has been running for a very long time. It deserves your compassion more than your frustration, because it learned to be this way for reasons that once made perfect sense, reasons rooted in a time when holding everything together felt like the only safe option available to you, the only way to keep the ground from shifting beneath your feet. Perhaps you are the one people come to when things fall apart, the steady one who always seems to know what needs to happen next and in what order and by when. There is a kind of quiet pride in that, a deep satisfaction in being the one others lean on, and you would be right to honor that pride, because it was earned through real effort, real sacrifice, real years of showing up when showing up was hard. But there is also an exhaustion that comes from being always available, always braced, always ready to catch whatever might fall, an exhaustion that accumulates so gradually over the months and years that you mistake its weight for the normal heaviness of being alive. This weariness is the mark of a body that has never fully learned to set its burdens down, because setting things down has always felt too much like letting people down, too much like abandoning the post that nobody asked you to fill but that you filled anyway because nobody else was going to. Tonight, in this darkness that asks nothing of you, there is a different kind of invitation waiting. It does not require you to fix or manage or anticipate anything at all. The only thing this moment needs from you is your willingness to be in it, fully and without reservation, to let the weight of the day settle somewhere other than your shoulders, to notice the bed beneath you holding your body the way you have spent so many hours holding everything else for everyone around you. Tonight, you are being held right now, quietly and without fanfare, by the simple fact of gravity and softness and the night's patient, unhurried arms. Feel the surface beneath you, the mattress or the cushion or whatever it is that supports you in this moment, and notice how it does not ask you to earn its support. It does not require a demonstration of worthiness or a list of accomplishments or a promise that you will be productive tomorrow. It simply receives the full weight of your body without negotiation or conditions, without keeping a tally of what is owed. This is what the earth does for every living thing, holds it without being asked and without keeping score, never withdrawing its support when the performance falls short of some imagined standard. The trees outside your window do not worry about whether they deserve the ground beneath their roots. They simply grow because the ground is there, and they trust it to remain through every season, through every storm, through every long and quiet night. You have spent so much of your life being the ground for other people, the stable surface they could count on when their own footing felt uncertain. Somewhere in that long and faithful service, you forgot that you too are allowed to rest on something solid, that being held is not the same as being weak, that letting someone or something support you does not diminish the strength you have shown in supporting others. If anything, the willingness to be held requires its own kind of courage, because admitting that you cannot and were never meant to carry everything alone, that even the strongest ground needs bedrock beneath it, that even the deepest roots need soil to anchor in. So tonight, as you lie here in the gathering dark, let yourself feel the way the bed receives you, completely and without reservation, the way it takes your weight as though your weight were exactly what it was designed for. Let your shoulders settle, not because you are forcing them down, but because there is simply no reason to hold them up right now, no burden to bear or crisis lurking at the edge of the next moment. The ceiling above you is not going to fall. The morning is hours away, and it will arrive whether you prepare for it or not, whether you spend these quiet hours rehearsing for its demands or let them pass in the gentle, undemanding company of rest. Your hands, those faithful instruments of control and care, can soften now. You might notice that even as you lie still, there is a faint tension in your fingers, a subtle curl as though they were still reaching for something to hold, something to fix, some invisible thread that might unravel if they let go for even a moment. Observe that impulse with the gentleness you would offer a child who clutches a favorite toy even in sleep, not because the toy is needed, but because the holding has become a habit deeper than thought, older than memory, more automatic than anything the conscious mind could direct. What would it be like to open those hands, just slightly, just enough to feel the cool air between your fingers? Not to drop everything you are carrying, not to abandon your responsibilities or the people who depend on you, but simply to loosen the grip for these few hours, to let your palms face upward in the darkness like two small boats resting on still water with nowhere to go and nothing to carry. Try it now if you like, or simply imagine it, the slow uncurling of fingers that have been clenched around the invisible weight of 100 daily worries, the gentle release of a hold that has been maintained for so long it has become indistinguishable from the hand itself. There is a wisdom in the open hand that the clenched fist will never know, a wisdom that has been spoken of for thousands of years in quiet rooms and mountain monasteries and beneath old trees where people gathered to talk about what it means to be alive without being consumed by the living. The fist believes that strength is proven by what you can hold on to, by how tightly you can grasp the things you fear losing. But the open hand understands something different, something the fist has long forgotten in its desperate clenching. It understands that what is truly yours cannot be lost by loosening your grip, and what is not truly yours was never held in the first place, only borrowed for a time and then released to continue on its own way. This is the beginning of a longer journey through the hours of the night, a slow unwinding of the grip you had forgotten you were holding, and you do not need to arrive anywhere by morning, do not need to have mastered any art by the time the first light reaches your window. Tonight is not a lesson or a test or a challenge to be met with the same fierce determination you bring to everything else. It is simply an invitation to notice, with the same careful attention you bring to every other part of your life, the places where you are holding on more tightly than necessary, and to wonder, gently and without judgment, what might happen if you didn't. The night is here now, folded around you like a cloth that asks nothing in return. Let it hold you the way you have held so many things today, with patience and without complaint. Whatever comes next, let it arrive like weather, something you observe but do not need to control, something that passes through you and moves on, leaving you lighter than it found you. Close your eyes if they are not already closed, and let the darkness be a kindness rather than an absence, a softness rather than a void. There is no urgency to any of this, no deadline by which the letting go must be accomplished or measurement of progress that needs to be satisfied before dawn. The night is patient in a way that the day never seems to manage, stretching out before you like a road with no destination, a journey whose only purpose is the traveling itself. You can move through it at whatever pace feels right, pausing when you need to pause, breathing when you need to breathe, simply lying still when stillness is the only thing you have the energy to offer. Stillness is enough. It has always been enough, even though the daytime version of your life has spent years arguing otherwise, insisting that only motion has value, only productivity justifies the hours. But here, in the gentle republic of the night, different rules apply. Here, the most productive thing you can do is nothing at all. The most important task on your agenda is the absence of tasks. The most valuable use of your time is the deliberate, conscious, almost revolutionary act of not using your time for anything except being alive in a warm bed in a dark room, breathing slowly, letting the thoughts come and go without chasing them, feeling the weight of your body being held by something that does not ask you to earn the holding. You are safe here, and the grip can soften, and the hands can open. The night is long enough to hold you, while you learn to hold a little less. There is a moment every morning, a small and nearly invisible one, that happens before you are fully awake. It lasts perhaps 2 or 3 seconds, sometimes less, and during it you are simply alive, nothing more and nothing less. Your body is warm under the covers, and your mind has not yet remembered its list of obligations, has not yet begun the elaborate machinery of the day's management. For those few heartbeats between sleep and waking, you exist the way a stone exists in a riverbed, present and unburdened, shaped by the current, but not trying to direct it anywhere, not trying to manage its flow or anticipate where it will turn next. Then something shifts, subtle as a change in wind direction. A thought arrives, quiet at first, like the first drop of rain before a downpour, and suddenly the whole engine of your day begins to spin, warming up with the practiced efficiency of a machine that has been started this way 10,000 times before. You remember the thing you said yesterday that might have come out wrong, the message you need to send before 9, and the appointment that requires preparation you haven't quite finished. In the space between one breath and the next, your hands begin to clench around the invisible threads of the day, gathering them up, sorting them, pulling them taut against the chaos that might otherwise take hold if you specifically, were not there to prevent it. This is where it begins each morning, the subtle transition from rest to readiness, from open hands to closed fists. It happens so quickly and so automatically that you probably don't even notice it anymore, the way your body shifts from a posture of receiving to a posture of reaching, the way your jaw tightens almost imperceptibly as the first wave of responsibility washes over you like cold water. Before your feet have even touched the floor, you are already carrying the full weight of the day, already holding it all together in the practiced grip of someone who has been doing this for years, maybe decades, maybe for as long as you can clearly remember. Think about what that first hour looks like, not the specific details of your particular routine, but the feeling that runs beneath it like an underground river, always moving, always present. There is a vigilance to it, isn't there? A constant low-level scanning of the horizon for things that might need your attention. You check your phone not because you want to, but because something in you needs to know whether anything has gone wrong while you slept, whether any of the plates you left spinning have wobbled or fallen in your absence. You run through your mental calendar not once but several times, verifying from different angles that you haven't forgotten a commitment or a deadline, a promise you made to someone who is counting on your follow-through. Other people might do some version of this too, the morning check-in with the day's demands. But there is a quality to the way you do it that goes beyond simple planning, beyond the ordinary human act of orienting yourself to the hours ahead. For you, it carries the weight of prevention, the deeply held belief that if you just think through everything carefully enough, you can stop bad things from happening. If you can anticipate every possible problem and every conflict, every forgotten detail, then maybe, just maybe, nothing will fall apart today. Nobody will be disappointed. Nothing will slip through the cracks that you have spent so much energy trying to seal shut. This belief has served you well in many ways that deserve acknowledgement. It has made you reliable and thorough, the person who remembers the small things that others forget, the one who notices when the supplies are running low or when a deadline is approaching faster than anyone else has realized. People trust you because you have earned that trust through thousands of small acts of anticipation over many years, through decades of catching things before they fell. There is genuine skill in what you do, genuine intelligence and genuine care in the way you hold the complex web of obligations and relationships that make up the daily fabric of your life. But the cost of that skill, the price you pay for being the one who catches everything, is a kind of constant tension that never fully releases, not even here, not even now, not even in the hours that are supposed to belong to rest. Even when there is nothing urgent happening, even when the day is going smoothly and every plate is still spinning and every ball is still in the air, some part of you remains braced for the moment when something might go wrong. You carry a readiness that has no off switch, an alertness that follows you from the kitchen to the car to the office to the dinner table, humming beneath every interaction like a wire pulled so taut it vibrates at a frequency only you can hear. Tonight, lying here in the quiet, you can feel the echo of that morning tension even now. Your body remembers the way it gathered itself at dawn, the way your shoulders lifted and your stomach tightened as the day's demands assembled themselves in your mind like soldiers falling into formation. Even hours after the day has ended, long after the last email was sent and the final errand was completed, your body is still holding the shape of that vigilance, still braced against a threat that exists now only in the residue of habit and the long, loyal memory of muscle that does not know how to forget. What if you could go back to that moment, the one before the first thought arrived, the 2 or 3 seconds of simple existence that preceded the clenching? You cannot return to this morning, of course, but you can return to the feeling, because it is still inside you, buried beneath the layers of responsibility and readiness like a seed beneath winter snow. It is the feeling of being alive without needing to justify it, of existing without managing anything or breathing without checking first to make sure the breathing is being done correctly and on schedule. Right now, in this bed, in this room on this quiet hour, you are closer to that feeling than you have been all day. Your lists and obligations are still there, stored faithfully in the filing cabinet of your mind, but they do not require your attention at this late hour. The phone is dark or nearly so, its screen no longer demanding your response. Whatever emails arrive today can wait until a time when your hands are ready to hold them again, when your mind is refreshed enough to engage with their particular demands. Nothing in the world outside your window needs your grip right now, not the job or the family or the carefully maintained order of your household. For these hours, the morning is as far away as a country you once visited but cannot quite remember the name of, distant and irrelevant to the warmth of where you lie. Let yourself feel what the morning takes from you, not with resentment or bitterness, but with a kind of tender recognition. Each day asks you to pick up so much, to carry so many invisible bundles in those strong and tired hands. Each sunrise begins with an active gathering that you never consciously chose but have performed so faithfully that it has become indistinguishable from who you are. But you are not the gathering, not the endless picking up and sorting and holding in place. You are the one who gathers, and there is a difference, a crucial one, between the task you perform and the person performing it. The task can be set down. The person remains. Underneath all the holding and the managing, the constant reaching forward into the next hour and the hour after that, there is someone who was once content to simply lie still and feel the warmth of covers and the quiet rhythm of their own breathing. That someone is still here, still waiting, patient as the earth, still as real as the person who checks the calendar and answers the messages and remembers the appointments. Tonight, for a little while, let that quieter self come forward, the one who existed before the grip became a habit, the one who knew how to rest without first earning the right to do so through sufficient productivity and adequate vigilance. Your morning will come again, as mornings always do, bringing its familiar parade of demands and decisions and small urgencies that will feel important in the daylight. But that is hours from now, a lifetime from now, in the slow currency of the night, where minutes stretch like honey from a spoon and hours pass with the gentle patience of clouds crossing a wide and empty sky. Here, in this space between the day that was and the day that will be, you are free to simply exist without the morning's demands, to let your hands lie open against the sheets and feel the bed holding your weight without needing to hold anything at all in return. Breathe into that freedom, even if it feels unfamiliar, even if some part of you insists that resting without preparation is somehow irresponsible, somehow a dereliction of the post you have been manning for so long. That voice, the one that equates rest with laziness and stillness with negligence, has been wrong about this for a very long time. Rest is not the opposite of responsibility, but the foundation on which all real responsibility is built, the deep well from which tomorrow's strength will be drawn, and the quiet soil in which the morning's energy is already growing roots. The morning version of you, the one who gathers and clenches and scans the horizon with such tireless dedication, does not need to be abandoned or criticized for the way it operates. It has gotten you through countless days, solved countless problems, held countless things together when they might otherwise have come apart. That version of you deserves respect and even gratitude for the work it has done, but it does not need to be on duty right now. It can stand down for the night, the way a soldier stands down when the watch is over, knowing that rest is not desertion, but preparation, not weakness, but the source of whatever strength the morning will require. So let the morning wait. Let the lists dissolve into the darkness like writing on water, fading even as you try to read them, returning to the formless quiet from which they came. Let the phone stay silent and the calendar stay closed while the thousand small worries that usually fill this space between waking and sleeping find somewhere else to rest tonight, somewhere that is not your shoulders, not your jaw, not the tight curl of your faithful, exhausted, beautifully human hands. There is an invisible labor that you perform every day, a kind of work that appears on no paycheck and earns no recognition and receives no gratitude, yet consumes more of your energy than almost anything else you do. It is the labor of anticipation, the constant scanning of the horizon for problems that haven't happened yet, paired with the careful rehearsal of contingency plans for disasters that may never arrive at your door. You do this work so automatically, so seamlessly woven into the texture of your thinking, that most people around you have no idea it is happening at all, no idea that the calm and capable surface they see is being maintained by an engine of vigilance running at full speed beneath it. While they see you simply going about your day, making decisions, handling logistics, keeping things running smoothly, they do not see the elaborate inner machinery that makes all of that possible. They do not see the way your mind runs 3 or 4 scenarios simultaneously whenever someone suggests a change of plans, calculating risks and fallback options and worst-case outcomes before the sentence is even finished leaving their mouth. They do not see the quiet, grinding exhaustion that comes from living several steps ahead of the present moment, always arriving mentally at the place where things could go wrong long before you arrive physically at the place where they actually might. This is the work of the one who carries it all, the invisible cost of being the person who makes things look effortless. You have become so good at this particular form of labor that it no longer feels like work to you, any more than breathing feels like work or blinking feels like work. It is simply the way you move through the world, with a constant background process running that monitors for threats, catalogs potential disruptions, prepares responses for scenarios that exist only in the elaborate theater of your anticipating mind, and does all of this while you simultaneously carry on a conversation, prepare a meal, drive to an appointment, or sit in a meeting looking perfectly composed. Consider how you plan today. Not just the obvious planning of appointments and tasks that anyone might do, but the deeper, quieter planning that happened beneath the surface of your consciousness. When you agreed to meet someone, did some part of you immediately begin calculating how long the drive would take, accounting for traffic and weather and the possibility of construction, figuring out what you would need to finish beforehand, and whether you should have an alternate location in mind in case the first one was too crowded? When a colleague mentioned a change in direction, did you feel the subtle click of your mind shifting into problem-solving mode, identifying every downstream consequence before anyone else had even processed what had been said? This is what you do, and this is what costs you more than anyone around you will ever understand or appreciate. You see the threads that connect things, the domino chains that others miss entirely, small cracks in the plan that could widen into chasms if nobody intervenes in time. Your mind has been trained, by experience or temperament or both, to catch these things early, to intervene before the wobble becomes a fall. It is genuinely useful, this ability, and it has prevented real disasters in ways that nobody will ever fully appreciate because the disasters simply never happened, averted by your quiet vigilance before they could take shape. But it also means that you are carrying, at any given moment, the weight of not just what is happening but what could happen, not just the problems that exist, but the problems that might exist in an hour, a day, a week from now. You carry the weight of the canceled flight and the missed deadline, the forgotten obligation and the argument that could erupt if you say the wrong thing at dinner tonight. You carry all of these simultaneously, stacking them on top of the real and present demands of the moment, until the load becomes so heavy that you can no longer tell which burdens are actual and which are imagined, which weights belong to the present and which belong to a future that may never arrive. Here is something worth sitting with tonight, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. A great deal of what you carry has not happened and will not happen. The disasters you prevent in your mind, the elaborate scenarios you rehearse and prepare for with such diligence, are mostly phantoms. The vast majority of them are phantoms, shadows thrown on the wall by a mind that has learned to see threat in every flicker of change, every deviation from the plan. This is not a failing of yours, not a weakness or a dysfunction that needs to be corrected. It is, in its own painful way, a kind of love, a fierce and tireless desire to protect the people and the life you care about from harm. But love expressed as constant vigilance is love that exhausts the lover, devotion that drains the devoted until there is nothing left to give except more vigilance, more scanning, more desperate gripping of the wheel. There is a particular cruelty in this kind of exhaustion because the very thing that makes you tired is also the thing that makes you feel necessary. If you stop anticipating, the reasoning goes, who will catch what falls? If you stop planning for the worst, won't the worst simply arrive unimpeded, crashing through the door you are no longer guarding? The fear that keeps you gripping is the same fear that keeps you from letting go, a perfect loop that feeds itself endlessly, each turn of the wheel making the next turn feel more necessary than the last. But consider this as you lie here in the stillness, your body warm and your eyes heavy with the weight of a day well carried. There have been times when things went wrong despite all your careful planning, moments when the disaster you failed to anticipate arrived anyway, bypassing all your elaborate defenses like water finding its way around a stone in a stream. Somehow, despite the shock of it, you survived. Life continued, bruised perhaps but not destroyed. The people you love continued too. The morning came again and with it the familiar gathering of your daily burdens and you carried on, because carrying on is the thing you know how to do better than almost anything. Those moments, the ones where your careful planning was not enough, hold a truth that the planning mind does not want to hear. They whisper that control is partly an illusion, a convincing story you tell yourself to make the vast uncertainty of being alive feel bearable. You cannot prevent every bad thing from happening, no matter how carefully you scan the horizon, no matter how many scenarios you rehearse. Some rain will fall on days when you plan for sunshine. Some problems will bloom in fields you never thought to watch, growing quietly while your attention was fixed elsewhere. This is not a reason to stop caring or to abandon your careful stewardship. It is simply an invitation to notice the difference between preparation and preoccupation, between healthy foresight and the compulsive rehearsal of worst-case scenarios that robs you of the present moment and all its quiet gifts. There is a space between carelessness and hypervigilance, a wide and fertile middle ground where planning serves you rather than enslaving you, where you can hold the future lightly rather than clutching it with the white-knuckled desperation of someone who believes that letting go is the same as falling. For tonight, you do not need to find that middle ground or solve the puzzle of how to care without clenching. All you need to do is notice, with the kind and curious attention of someone observing weather from a comfortable window, how your mind is still trying to anticipate even now, still running its quiet calculations about tomorrow and next week. Notice it the way you might notice clouds moving across a dark sky, with interest but without the need to change their direction. Let the scenarios play themselves out if they must, but do not grip them. Let your mind rehearse its contingencies the way a river rehearses its path to the sea, naturally and without effort, and then let the rehearsals dissolve into the warm darkness of this room, the way breath dissolves in cold air, visibly for a moment and then gone. They will be there tomorrow if you need them. The planning mind will wake when you wake, faithful as always. But here, in the mercy of the night, you can let it rest, and in doing so, let yourself rest in a way that the planning mind alone has never been able to provide. The weight of what might go wrong is so much heavier than the weight of what actually does, because it multiplies endlessly, branching into possibilities and sub-possibilities until the load becomes infinite, until you are carrying not one future but 1,000 futures on those tired shoulders. Setting down that weight does not mean you don't care. It means you recognize that this particular burden was never yours to carry, because the future, in all its branching uncertainty, has never belonged to anyone. There is a particular kind of freedom in admitting that you do not know what tomorrow will bring, a lightness that comes from setting down the pretense of omniscience and allowing the future to be what it has always been, which is genuinely and irreducibly unknown. The planning mind treats this uncertainty as a threat, a void that must be filled with predictions and preparations and defensive strategies. But uncertainty is not a void at all. It is a space and opening, a room in the house of your life that has been locked shut by the conviction that every room must be occupied and accounted for. Leaving that room empty, allowing the unknown to remain unknown without trying to furnish it with your anxious predictions, is not negligence. It is a form of trust that the planning mind has never been willing to extend to the world. Sleep does not ask you to plan for it. It asks only that you stop planning for everything else, just for a little while, just long enough for the body to remember what it feels like to exist without a contingency for every possible outcome. You have been your own safety net for so long. Tonight, let the bed be your net instead. Let the darkness catch you. Let the hours pass without your supervision, because they know the way to morning better than any plan could chart. Somewhere beneath all the planning and the managing, beneath the carefully organized days and the lists that keep the world from spinning into chaos, there is something you do not often look at directly. It sits in a room at the center of your competence, a small and quiet room that you have decorated so thoroughly with efficiency and reliability that most people, including yourself on most days, have forgotten the room is there at all. But tonight, in the honest dark where there is nowhere else to look and nothing else to arrange, it is worth opening that door, just a crack, just enough to let a little light fall on what lives inside. What lives inside is fear, not the dramatic kind, not the fear of heights or deep water or the particular terror of standing at the edge of a high place, but something much more ordinary and much more persistent, something that hums at a frequency so constant you have stopped hearing it consciously. It is the fear that if you stop holding everything together, everything will fall apart, It is the belief, lodged so deep it feels less like a belief and more like a law of nature, that you are the only thing standing between order and catastrophe, between the smooth running of your world and its total, irreversible collapse into chaos. This fear is not irrational, or at least it did not begin that way. Somewhere in the long history of your life, you learned that things really could fall apart if nobody was paying attention. Perhaps you watched it happen in the home where you grew up, a relationship that crumbled because no one was minding the cracks, a household that descended into disorder because the person who usually held it together was overwhelmed or absent, or simply too tired to continue. Perhaps you were the child who noticed what the adults missed or chose to ignore, the one who learned early that someone had to be the responsible one, and if no one else was volunteering for the role, it might as well be you, because you could see clearly what needed doing even if nobody else seemed willing to see it. These experiences taught you something true, that attention matters, that care matters, that someone really does need to notice when things are starting to slip. But they also taught you something that was only partly true, something that has calcified over the years into a conviction you rarely question. They taught you that the someone who notices must always be you, that your particular grip is the only thing preventing the fall, that loosening your hold even slightly is an invitation to the kind of disaster you watched happen long ago and swore you would never allow to happen again. Over time, this partial truth hardened into an absolute one, becoming so embedded in the way you see the world that questioning it feels dangerous, like pulling a thread that might unravel everything you have spent your adult life so carefully stitching together. There is a particular kind of loneliness in being governed by this fear, because it isolates you from the very people you are working so hard to protect. When your attention is perpetually split between the present moment and the imagined disasters lurking just beyond the horizon, you cannot fully inhabit the conversations or the meals, the quiet evenings that make up the actual substance of your life. You are there in body but elsewhere in mind, stationed at an outpost of anxiety that the people around you cannot see and therefore cannot share. They experience your presence as slightly distant, slightly preoccupied, and they learn over time not to ask why, because the answer you would give, "I'm fine, everything is fine," sounds believable enough to close the conversation before it reaches the tender truth beneath. But let us sit with this fear for a moment, here in the safety of the night where nothing is unraveling and nothing requires your intervention. What does it actually feel like, this fear that you are indispensable to the functioning of everything around you? Feel it in your body if you can, that subtle tightening that happens when you imagine stepping back from your post, the way your stomach clenches when you picture someone else handling a task you usually manage with such careful precision. There is a particular kind of unease that accompanies the thought of letting go, a physical resistance that goes deeper than thought, as though your body itself has learned to associate release with danger and stillness with the particular vulnerability that comes from not being in control. Notice how the fear does not confine itself to any single area of your life, but spreads its quiet influence across every domain, coloring your mornings with urgency and your evenings with review, saturating the hours between with a low-grade alertness that never quite allows you to be fully present in any moment because part of your attention is always deployed somewhere else, monitoring some other part of the operation for signs of impending trouble. It follows you into the kitchen when you prepare a meal, whispering that if you do not attend to this detail, it will be overlooked by everyone else, that the overlooking will set some small disaster in motion whose consequences only you have the foresight to imagine. It sits beside you in conversations, monitoring not just your own words, but the reactions of others, calculating in real time whether you have said the right thing or left the wrong impression, whether some invisible thread of connection has been weakened by a moment of inattention. The fear is not content to guard a single gate. It insists on guarding every entrance and every window, every crack in the wall that might admit the draft of uncertainty. The fear tells you many things, and it speaks in voices that sound reasonable, even loving, even wise. It tells you that caring means controlling, that responsibility means constant oversight, that love itself is measured by how tightly you hold the people and the things you cherish. It tells you that if you were really doing enough, if you were really being the kind of person you should be, you would never let anything slip through your fingers. Dropping the ball, in the vocabulary of this fear, is not a normal human experience that happens to everyone but a moral failure, evidence that you were not trying hard enough, not watching closely enough. Can you hear how exhausting that is? How heavy that particular worldview becomes when you carry it through every hour of every single day? Can you feel, even now, the weight of a life in which every drop stitch is a personal failing, every overlooked detail is proof of inadequacy, and each moment of inattention is a door left open for disaster to walk through and make itself at home? This is the engine that drives your grip, the belief system that powers the relentless clenching of your hands around the fabric of your life. It is not strength that keeps you holding on so tightly, though it wears the costume of strength with remarkable conviction. It is fear, and fear, however well disguised it may be, is always a heavy thing to carry. Here is something the fear does not want you to know, something it has worked very hard to keep you from discovering through all these years of faithful, exhausting service. The people around you are more capable than you give them credit for, and the world is more resilient than you believe it to be. Not because your contribution doesn't matter. It does, profoundly and in ways that deserve recognition and gratitude. But because the web of life is woven by many hands, not just yours, and it has a strength that no single thread can provide or destroy. Things will sometimes go wrong whether you are watching or not, and things will sometimes go right whether you intervene or not. Your grip, for all its faithfulness, is only one of many forces holding the fabric together. This is not an argument for carelessness or abdication of the things that genuinely need your attention. It is an invitation to consider the possibility that you have been carrying more than your share for a very long time, not because you are uniquely strong, but because you are uniquely afraid of what might happen if you carry less. The fear whispers that setting anything down is the first step toward everything collapsing. But the truth, the quiet truth that hides behind the fear like dawn behind a mountain, is that setting things down is often the first step toward discovering how much of the world can carry itself. Tonight, you do not need to test that truth or prove it or even fully believe it. This is not the night for bravery or experimentation. This is the night for simply noticing the fear, for seeing it clearly in the gentle lamplight of your attention, without trying to fix it or argue with it or make it go away. The fear has been your companion for a long time. It deserves to be seen, not with the harsh glare of judgment that demands immediate change, but with the soft and patient gaze of someone who understands that even the most exhausting habits began as acts of self-preservation, as the best available response to circumstances that left few other options. Imagine, if you will, that this fear is a small creature sitting at the foot of your bed, something not much larger than a cat, with wide eyes and a nervous disposition. It has been there all day, whispering its warnings, tugging at your sleeve, pointing at every potential catastrophe with its small and trembling paw. It does this because it loves you, in its own frantic and exhausting way. Long ago, in a time you may barely remember, watching for danger was the only way to stay safe, and the creature learned its lesson well, perhaps too well for anyone's comfort. You do not need to send it away tonight, or argue with it, or demonstrate through careful logic that its fears are overblown. Simply acknowledge it, the way you might acknowledge a worried child. Yes, I see you there. I hear what you are trying to tell me. But look around, the room is quiet, the night is gentle, and there is nothing here that requires our vigilance right now. The creature may not believe you immediately, and that is all right. Beliefs held for a lifetime do not release in a single evening, and patience with yourself is its own quiet form of loosening the grip that has held you for so long. Let the creature curl up at the foot of the bed if it wants to stay. Let it keep its watchful eyes open while the rest of you softens into the dark, and know that you are not asking it to disappear forever, only to rest alongside you for the brief and gentle hours that remain before morning. The fear has been working so hard for so long that it does not know how to stop, does not recognize the sensation of safety as something it is permitted to feel. In that way, it is very much like you, this small creature at the foot of your bed, because you too have been working beyond the point where work was necessary, pushing past the border of productive vigilance into the exhausting territory of vigilance for its own sake. The two of you and your fear, have been running side by side for years, each one convincing the other that stopping is not yet safe, that one more scan of the horizon is needed before the watch can end. Tonight, for the first time in a very long while, neither of you needs to run. The horizon is dark and quiet, the path ahead is short and leads only to morning, and the ground beneath you is steady enough to hold you both without requiring either of you to remain standing. Let the fear rest its small head on its paws, and let your own head sink a little deeper into the pillow, and let the two of you breathe together in the dark, companions in a long and wearying journey who have finally, gratefully, arrived at a place where they can stop. Your body has been keeping records that your mind has been too busy to read, filing them away in muscle and tendon and the deep tissue beneath the skin, in a language that is older than words and far more honest than any story the mind might tell. Every day of holding, every hour of clenching and bracing against the next potential crisis has left its mark on the flesh and bone and sinew of you, written in a script that cannot be erased by willpower alone, but can be softened by attention, by patience, by the gentle act of noticing what you have been carrying and deciding, even if only for tonight, to set some of it down. Begin with your shoulders, those faithful sentinels that have been standing guard since you first rose this morning. You might notice that they are still lifted, even now, still pulled slightly upward as though preparing to receive a blow or bear a burden that hasn't arrived yet and may never actually arrive. This is where so many people carry their readiness, in the trapezius muscles that connect the neck to the upper back, in the tight bands of tissue that form a kind of armor around the spine. Your shoulders have been raised like shields all day, maintaining their watch through every conversation and every quiet moment when you might have let them rest but didn't because the habit of holding is stronger than the desire for comfort, older and more deeply rooted than any conscious intention. Let them drop now, not with force but with permission, the way you might set down a heavy bag after a long walk. Simply notice that they are elevated and then invite them, gently, to come down, to release the position they have been holding all day without being asked to hold it. You may be surprised at how far they fall, how much distance there was between where they were gripping and where they actually want to rest. That distance, that gap between the braced position and the natural one, is a measure of the invisible labor you have been performing since morning, the work of constant readiness that your body has been doing on behalf of your worrying mind. Move your attention now to your jaw, that hinge of bone and muscle that has been clenching since the first difficult moment of the day, the first flash of frustration or worry that your face was not allowed to show. The jaw is a remarkable barometer of emotional tension, tightening faithfully in response to every stressor and rarely releasing fully until the body feels truly safe. You may have been grinding your teeth without knowing it, pressing them together in a silent expression of the effort it takes to hold everything in place while appearing effortless and composed. Let the jaw soften now, let the teeth part slightly, creating a small space between them that the tension has been trying to close all day. Feel the way this single act of opening creates a ripple of release that moves up into the temples and down into the neck, a cascade of easing that your body has been waiting for since the first clenching of the morning. Notice your hands again, the way they lie on the bed or rest on your stomach, or curl loosely at your sides. Even in this position of supposed rest, there may be a subtle tension in the fingers, a faint clinging quality as though they were still wrapped around the steering wheel or the phone, gripping the edges of a problem that needed solving hours ago. Your hands are the body's most eloquent instruments of control, grasping and arranging the physical world according to your will. When the mind cannot stop gripping, the hands cannot stop either, and they carry the evidence of your invisible work in their persistent tension long after the work itself is done and the world has moved on. Feel the way the tension lives in your forearms too, running in tight cords from wrist to elbow, a sympathetic clenching that supports the constant gripping of the hands. These muscles have been active for hours, not because you were lifting anything heavy, but because the act of managing and deciding and controlling requires a physical readiness that registers in the body even when the tasks themselves are purely mental. Your body does not distinguish between holding a heavy stone and holding a heavy thought, between the weight of something in your arms and the weight of something on your mind. To the muscles and the deep tissue, the load feels remarkably the same. Identical chemical signals flood through the fibers, triggering the same tightening response, activating in the same ancient pathways that evolved millions of years before the first human being had anything more complicated than a predator to worry about. Your ancestors gripped when they saw a shadow move in the grass. You grip when you see a message notification appear on your screen. The body responds identically to both, flooding the muscles with readiness, preparing the limbs for action, tightening the core against an impact that was once physical and is now entirely emotional, but that the deep tissue cannot tell apart from the old, original danger. Your stomach carries its own careful record of the day. You might notice a tightness there, a subtle drawing in of the abdominal muscles that has nothing to do with posture and everything to do with the unconscious bracing that accompanies anticipation. When you spend your days waiting for the next thing that might go wrong, scanning for threats both real and imagined, the stomach responds by contracting, creating a physical shield against an emotional blow that the body does not realize is only imagined, only a projection of the anxious mind onto the innocent canvas of the present moment. The contraction may have become so familiar over the years that you no longer recognize it as tension at all, mistaking it instead for the natural state of your abdomen, the way it has always felt, how you assume everyone's belly feels at the end of a long day. But this tightness is not natural. It is a learned response, an armoring that was once useful in moments of genuine danger and has since generalized to cover every moment, dangerous or not, until the body can no longer remember what it feels like to be soft and undefended in its own center. But you are not facing any threat tonight, only the memory of emotional ones that have already passed and left their residue in your tissue. The room around you is safe and the door is closed, the covers warm against your skin. Whatever challenges tomorrow may bring, they are not here in this bed with you, and they do not require the armoring of your belly or the bracing of your core. Let the muscles there soften, like a fist slowly opening, and feel the breath move more deeply as the space in your abdomen expands. Notice how the release of tension in one area creates room for release in others, how the softening of the stomach allows the chest to open, which allows the shoulders to drop further, which allows the jaw to relax more completely, each release encouraging the next like a gentle cascade flowing downward through the body toward the earth. This is the body's natural chain of release, the sequence that unfolds when you finally give permission to set down what has been carried through the long hours of the day. The body knows how to do this, has always known, the way it knows how to heal a cut or fight a fever or grow new cells while you sleep. The wisdom of letting go is not something you need to learn from outside yourself. It is already encoded in your tissues, waiting patiently for the signal that it is safe to begin, that the battle is over for now, that the one who keeps watch can stand down until morning. There is a pattern here worth noticing, a relationship between mind and body that runs in both directions like traffic on a bridge. When your mind grips, your body clenches in faithful sympathy, tightening the shoulders and the jaw, the hands and stomach. When your body clenches, your mind grips more tightly in response, interpreting the physical tension as evidence that something must be wrong. The two feed each other in a loop that can run all day and deep into the night if nothing interrupts it, a feedback cycle of tension that becomes self-sustaining. But the loop can be broken from either direction with surprising ease, and tonight, starting with the body is gentler, because the body is honest in a way the mind sometimes struggles to be. Move your attention slowly down your legs, those pillars that have carried you through the day's demands without complaint. The thighs may be holding more tension than you expect, a residual tightness from the bracing of standing and walking, and the unconscious readiness to move quickly if needed. The calves may be knotted with the memory of forward motion and hurrying, of always being on the way to somewhere. Even the feet may be curled slightly, the toes pressing against one another in a miniature version of the same gripping pattern that your hands have been performing all day. Invite all of these areas to soften, not in a rush but gradually, the way snow melts when the first warm day of spring arrives, slowly and with an inevitability that requires no force. You do not need to direct the release or manage its timeline. Simply turn your attention toward each area of tension, acknowledge that it is there, and give it permission to let go. Some areas will release quickly, like a sigh that has been waiting all day. Others may hold on longer, resistant to the unfamiliar experience of surrender because they have been gripping for so long that the grip itself has become their resting state. Be patient with the parts that resist. They are not defying you. They are protecting you, or believe they are, performing for the body the same service that the anxious mind performs for your life, standing guard against a threat that may not exist outside the long memory of past alarms. Each time a muscle softens, each time a joint loosens, a quiet message travels back to the brain. It carries reassurance that safety is possible without vigilance, that peace can coexist with the open hand. Let those messages accumulate, like drops of water on stone, and trust them to do their slow and patient work. The body has been waiting a long time for this conversation, and it will listen to whatever kindness you are willing to offer, absorbing each gentle word of permission the way dry soil absorbs the first rain after a long and quiet drought. Notice too the places where you carry tension that you never consciously placed there, the small muscles behind your ears that tighten when you are concentrating, or the space between your ribs that narrows when you are bracing for difficult news, the backs of your knees that lock when you have been standing in readiness for too long. These forgotten outposts of tension are evidence of how thoroughly the holding has infiltrated every corner of your physical self, how the mind's ceaseless vigilance has recruited the body as its ally in the long campaign against disorder, drafting muscles into service that were never designed for the kind of sustained clenching they have been asked to perform. They have been loyal soldiers in this campaign, following orders without question, holding their positions long past the point of exhaustion because nobody gave them permission to stand down. You are giving that permission now, quietly and without ceremony, the way a commander gives the order to rest after a long march through difficult terrain, not because the mission has failed, but because the body has earned the right to recover, to tend to itself with the same care it has been extending to every external demand placed upon it. The muscles that have been gripping can soften into the warmth of the bed beneath you, and the joints that have been locked can ease into positions of comfort rather than readiness. There is nothing to brace for in this room, nothing to grip in this darkness, nothing to hold together with the desperate strength of a body that believes relaxation is merely the brief pause between one emergency and the next. There is a story you have been telling yourself for a long time, a narrative so woven into the fabric of your identity that questioning it feels almost like questioning your own name. It is the story of the indispensable one, the person without whom everything would collapse into disorder, and the keystone in the arch of everyone else's stability. In this story, you are the reason the household functions, the reason the project succeeds, why the fragile order of daily life holds together instead of shattering into 1,000 unmanageable pieces that nobody else would know how to reassemble. This story has been playing in the background of your days for so long that you no longer hear it as a story. It sounds like simple fact, like a description of the way things are. The story is not entirely false, and that is what makes it so difficult to see clearly, so hard to hold up to the light and examine honestly. You do contribute enormously to the lives of the people around you, and your absence would be felt deeply by anyone who has grown accustomed to your steady, quiet, tireless care. But there is a difference, a vast and important one, between being deeply valued and being the sole support for everything around you. The first is a beautiful truth about your place in the web of your relationships. The second is a myth that has been keeping you exhausted for years, a lie whispered in the voice of love that prevents you from ever truly resting, because resting would mean stepping away from the post, and stepping away would mean risking the very collapse that only you can prevent. Think about the times you have been unavailable, the days when illness forced you into bed or a trip took you far from your usual station of watchfulness. Did the world actually end? Were the household routines truly shattered beyond recovery, or did life simply rearrange itself in your absence? In most cases, the honest answer, the one that requires some courage to admit, is no. Things may have been less smooth than usual, less organized, less perfectly managed than they would have been under your careful watch. Someone may have forgotten something you would have remembered. A meal may have been simpler or later or stranger than it would have been if you had been the one preparing it. But the fundamental structure of life held, carried by the combined effort of others who stepped up in your absence with more competence than the myth of your indispensability had led you to expect. This is not a comfortable thing to hear, because the story of the indispensable one, however exhausting, also provides something precious that the exhaustion itself almost succeeds in concealing. It gives you a role and a purpose, a clear and unambiguous reason for being that does not need to be questioned or defended. If you are the one who holds it all together, then your value is self-evident, proven every day by the simple fact that things work while you are in charge of them. Questioning the myth means questioning your place in the structure of your own life, and that can feel, at least at first, like free-falling into uncertainty, like letting go of a trapeze before the next bar has swung into reach. But consider what the myth costs you when you add up the balance honestly. Think of the years of sleep lost to worry about details that might have resolved themselves without your intervention. Consider the dinners half-tasted because your mind was already racing ahead to the next task, the quiet moments with people you love that were colonized by the mental labor of managing their lives alongside your own. Consider the resentment that sometimes surfaces like a bubble from the bottom of a deep pool, bitter and unwelcome and quickly swallowed because the indispensable one is not supposed to resent the very burden that gives them their identity. Then consider the evenings when you sat in a room full of people who care about you and still felt profoundly alone, because the role of the indispensable one does not leave much room for the kind of honest, vulnerable, reciprocal connection that nourishes the spirit the way food nourishes the body. Consider the loneliness of being always the strong one, the person everyone leans on, but who has no one to lean on in return, because leaning would mean admitting that the myth is only that, a story you have been telling long past the point where you still needed it, a defense that has outlived the danger it was built to protect against. The myth isolates you even as it binds you to others, because the bond it creates runs in only one direction, always from you outward, never from the world back toward the secret center of your need, the part of you that has been hungry for rest and reciprocity for longer than you would like to admit. Consider, too, the way the myth distorts your perception of everyone around you, shrinking their capabilities in your mind until they appear fragile and dependent in ways that may not match who they actually are. When you believe yourself to be the keystone, every other stone in the arch looks precarious by comparison, unable to bear weight, likely to crumble without the constant pressure of your support. But this perception is a product of the myth rather than an accurate assessment of reality. The people in your life have their own strength and their own resilience, quiet competence that you may have been too busy being indispensable to notice. They stumble sometimes, as everyone does, but stumbling is not the same as falling, and falling is not the same as being unable to rise again without your particular hand extended to pull them upward. There is an ancient observation, passed down through centuries of careful thought about what humans can and cannot control, that deserves a place in this nighttime contemplation. It is the recognition that most of what we grip so tightly lies outside our actual influence. We can prepare and plan and position ourselves with all the skill our experience allows, but the outcomes of our actions are shaped by forces far larger than any single person's effort. The weather does not consult your plans before it changes, and the moods and choices of the people you love do not follow the careful script you have prepared for them. Meanwhile, the thousand small variables that determine whether a day goes smoothly or falls apart are mostly beyond the reach of any one pair of hands, no matter how skilled or how loving those hands may be. What lies within your genuine influence is far smaller than the myth of indispensability suggests, and far more precious for its smallness. You can choose how you respond to what happens around you, tending to your own actions and intentions with the care they deserve. It is possible to show up with honesty and offer your love without conditions. These things, the things that actually belong to you, do not require a death grip or a white-knuckled hold. They require only your attention and your willingness, both of which flow more freely from open hands than from clenched ones. Everything else, the outcomes and reactions of others, the thousand moving parts of a world that was beautifully chaotic long before you arrived in it, these things were never truly in your hands. You have been gripping them anyway with heroic persistence, and the effort has been tremendous, worthy of admiration in its own exhausting way. But the control was always partly an illusion, a convincing performance of mastery that even you, the performer, believed was real. It is a strange and sobering thing to realize, lying here in the dark with your hands finally empty, that so much of what you have been holding was never actually holdable, that the weight you have been carrying was composed largely of things that would have floated past you if you had simply opened your fingers and let them go. The real weight, the genuine substance of your life, was always much lighter than the accumulated phantom weight of everything you were trying to control, and distinguishing between the two is one of the kindest things you could ever learn to do for yourself. There is also a tender insight about the way we construct our identities around what we fear most, building elaborate fortresses of competence over the very vulnerability we are trying to hide. If your deepest fear is that things will fall apart without your vigilance, then building an identity as the person who prevents collapse is a brilliant psychological defense. It turns the anxiety into a skill, the fear into a purpose. But it also means that your sense of self is built on the foundation of the very thing you are most afraid of, which means the fear can never be fully addressed, only managed and managed again, because addressing it would mean dismantling the identity that has been built on top of it. Tonight, you do not need to dismantle anything, but you can notice the structure just enough to see how the myth, the fear, and your identity have all grown together over the years, tangled roots in the same soil. You can hold that knowledge gently, the way you might hold a letter you are not yet ready to open, trusting that you will read it when the time is right. The noticing alone is enough for now. The simple recognition that the indispensable one is a role you play rather than the whole of who you are, a part you have rehearsed so thoroughly that the lines come out naturally, but a part nonetheless, with a performer behind it who is tired and real, and so much more than any single role could ever contain. Somewhere in the quietest corner of yourself, beneath the myth and the fear, past the elaborate machinery of daily management, there is a person who remembers what it felt like before the role began, before the script was written, before the stage was set and the audience assembled. That person has been waiting with remarkable patience for a night exactly like this one, a night when the theater goes dark and the curtain falls and there is nothing left to perform, nothing left to prove, nothing left to hold together with the desperate dedication of someone who has confused the role with the self that plays it. The world managed itself before you took charge of it, and it will manage again when you set it down for the night. This is not a diminishment of your value. It is a liberation from the impossible standard of being the only one holding everything together. You matter deeply, and other hands exist too, capable and willing, and both of those truths can coexist in the same moment, held gently together like two palms cupped around a small flame. Let that image settle into you tonight. The image of many hands holding the world, yours among them, but not alone, not the last line of defense. You are part of a web, and the web will hold while your thread rests. There's a quiet beauty in belonging to something larger than yourself, in recognizing that your efforts, however significant, are woven into a fabric that extends far beyond the reach of your own two hands. The myth of the indispensable one is a lonely myth because it places you at the center of everything and asks you to bear that centrality as both privilege and punishment. But the truth of the web is gentler and far more generous because it says that your contribution matters without saying that everything depends on it, that your thread adds strength to the whole without claiming that the whole would collapse if your thread were temporarily removed. Somewhere tonight, while you rest, the web is holding. Other threads are carrying the tension, absorbing the strain, doing the quiet work of maintenance that the myth told you only your hands could do. Let them carry it for these few hours and let yourself discover, perhaps for the first time in a very long while, what it feels like to be a part of something rather than the whole of it, to contribute without being consumed by the contributing and matter without being crushed by the mattering. There was a day, and maybe you remember it with painful clarity, or maybe it has blurred into the long procession of days that blend together when you have been managing for too many years, when something you were carrying actually slipped from your grasp. Not a metaphorical something, not a vague sense of things being slightly less organized than usual, but a real, specific thing that you had taken full responsibility for, that you had committed yourself to handling, that fell through the cracks despite your best and most vigilant efforts to prevent exactly that kind of falling. Perhaps it was a deadline you missed, one that you had circled in red and set multiple reminders for and still, somehow, let pass while you were busy catching a dozen other falling things. Maybe it was a promise you made to someone you love, one that got swallowed by the relentless appetite of everything else demanding your attention. Or it might have been something larger, a project that unraveled despite all the hours you had spent reinforcing it, a plan that failed despite your careful accounting of every variable you could identify and control. Whatever it was, do you remember how it felt in the immediate aftermath? Not the practical consequences, though those may have been significant, but the emotional landscape of the moment when you realized it had fallen. There was probably shock first, the disorienting experience of watching something you were sure you had held securely simply come apart in your hands, like paper left out in the rain. Then guilt arrived almost instantly, a hot wave of self-recrimination flooding through your chest, whispering that you should have held on tighter, should have paid more attention, should have been better than the person you apparently were. After the guilt came something more complex and harder to name, a mixture of shame and exposure that felt almost physical, as though a layer of armor had been stripped away and everyone could suddenly see the vulnerable, fallible, imperfect person underneath the competent exterior you had worked so hard and so long to construct. This is the part that hurt the most, not the practical failure, but the identity failure, the crack in the story of yourself as the one who never drops things and whose grip never fails. You may have replayed the sequence of events for days afterward, searching the timeline of your actions for the exact moment when you could have caught the fall and didn't, the precise instant when your attention wandered or your energy flagged or your hands, already full with so many other burdens, simply could not stretch far enough to hold one more thing without something slipping through. This replaying is its own kind of gripping, a retrospective clenching that tries to hold the past in place long enough to revise it, to find the alternate version of events in which you didn't fail, in which your grip held and the thing stayed where it was supposed to stay and the story ended differently. But the past cannot be gripped any more than the future can, and the replaying only adds another layer of exhaustion to a body and mind that were already stretched beyond their capacity. But now, with the comfortable distance of the dark and the softness of the pillow beneath your head, consider what happened in the days and weeks after the falling. Not immediately after, not in the heated moments of damage control and apology and self-blame, but later, when the initial shock had faded and you could begin to see more clearly. Did the world end? Did the relationship you feared would shatter actually break beyond repair? Or the career you were terrified of damaging actually crumble to nothing? In most cases, the answer is quieter and far less dramatic than the fear predicted. Things bent under the weight of the mistake, but they did not break completely. Someone else stepped in, perhaps, picking up the piece you dropped with more grace and competence than you had expected. A deadline was renegotiated with less drama than you had imagined during the anxious hours of anticipation. A difficult conversation happened that was painful but ultimately survivable, leaving the relationship not weaker but, in some surprising way, more honest than it had been before the falling. The world absorbed the impact of your failure the way the ocean absorbs a stone thrown from the shore, with a ripple that expanded outward and then faded, leaving the surface much as it was before, still vast, still moving, still carrying on. This is the secret that the grip does not want you to discover, the truth it has been working so hard to keep from your conscious awareness through all these years of vigilant service. Things can fall, and life can continue afterward. You can fail to hold something, and the morning will still arrive on schedule. The consequences of letting go are almost never as catastrophic as the fear of letting go has been insisting, because the fear is not making predictions based on evidence gathered carefully from your actual lived experience. It is making predictions based on terror, and terror is a notoriously unreliable forecaster, always expecting the worst and rarely accounting for the resilience that lives in every situation it evaluates. Think about the people who were affected by the thing you dropped. Think about how they actually responded, not in the anxious theater of your imagination, but in the reality that unfolded. There may have been frustration, certainly, and perhaps some disappointment that things did not go as planned. But was there also something gentler beneath the frustration? Did someone say it's okay, or we'll figure this out, or don't be so hard on yourself? Words that the fear had told you no one would ever offer because the fear believed your only value lay in your flawless performance? Those words, if they came, carried a message the gripping mind struggles to accept, the message that you are valued for more than your usefulness, that the people who care about you are not keeping score the way you keep score on yourself, that their love is not a payment issued in exchange for your perfect management of their lives. The fear reduces your worth to your function, defines you entirely by what you produce and maintain and prevent from falling. But the people who said those gentle words after the dropping were responding to something the fear cannot measure, something that has nothing to do with performance and everything to do with the simple, irreducible fact of who you are beneath all the producing and maintaining. There is a profound difference between being loved for what you do and being loved for who you are, and the fear has spent years blurring that distinction, insisting that the two are the same, that your worth and your output are interchangeable currencies that must be constantly earned. But the people who reached out after the falling, who offered kindness rather than the judgment you were so certain would come, they were not responding to your performance. They were responding to you, the real and imperfect and deeply human you, someone who tried hard and fell short and was brave enough to keep going anyway. That version of you, who sometimes drops things, is not a diminished version of the competent one. It is the same person, seen more completely, and the love it receives is steadier and more durable than any love that depends on flawless execution. This is what happens when the one who carries everything sets something down, whether by choice or by accident, or by the simple human limitation of having only 2 hands and only so many hours in a day. Other people discover their own capacity. New strengths emerge from places you never thought to look. The system, which had grown dependent on a single person's tireless effort, begins to redistribute the weight more evenly, developing a resilience that was impossible as long as one individual was trying to hold up the entire structure alone. None of this means you should deliberately drop things or abandon commitments to test this theory. It simply means that the narrative of total catastrophe, the story that says one dropped ball will trigger an avalanche of failure cascading through every area of your life, is not as true as it feels in the anxious hours when sleep will not come and the mind insists on reviewing every possible thing that might go wrong tomorrow. It means that the thing you are most afraid of has probably already happened at least once, and you survived it, and the world continued its slow turning without missing a single revolution. It means that the resilience you have been so afraid to test has already been tested, quietly and without your permission, and it held. Life did not shatter when you dropped something. It bent, it adjusted, it found a new configuration that accommodated the falling, and it moved forward with the calm persistence that life has always brought to the business of continuing, regardless of what any individual hand was doing at the time. Let this memory be a small lantern in the dark tonight, a steady flame that the wind of anxiety cannot extinguish because it is fed by something more durable than fear, which is experience, which is the lived and tested knowledge that falling does not equal ending. Let it illuminate the space between what the fear predicts and what actually happens when control is momentarily lost. That space, the gap between imagined catastrophe and lived reality, is wider than you think, wide enough to hold not just survival but genuine discovery, genuine growth, genuine relief. It is the room you have never allowed yourself to enter because the door was always blocked by the conviction that entering it would mean everything falling apart. The door is not locked, and it never was. It was only your hand pressed flat against it, holding it closed with the same fierce grip you bring to everything else. Tonight, you do not need to walk through it, simply noticing that it exists, that there is a space on the other side of your control where life continues and people manage and things somehow, improbably, work out, is enough. That noticing is its own quiet kind of release, a loosening so gentle you might not feel it happening until later when you realize that the hand against the door has softened without your asking it to, that the pressure you were exerting has eased by some small but measurable amount, not because you decided to let go, but because the body, in its wisdom, recognized that it was safe to hold a little less tightly in this room, in this darkness, on this quiet and forgiving night. There may be other days ahead when things will fall again, because falling is part of the rhythm of a life lived with open hands rather than clenched ones. Some of those fallings will be small and easily absorbed, the kind of minor stumbles that look alarming in the moment but leave no lasting mark on the landscape of your days. Others may feel more significant, more shaking, more likely to leave a bruise that lasts longer than you would prefer. But each falling carries the same quiet lesson that the one you are remembering tonight carried in its arms, the lesson that the ground is closer than you thought, that the impact is softer than the fear predicted, and that the getting up afterward is something you have always known how to do, even when you were convinced otherwise in the breathless seconds before you hit the earth. Let that knowing settle into you now, heavy and warm like a blanket pulled up to your chin on a cold evening. You have fallen before. You have survived the thing you most feared. The world continued turning, and the people in it continued caring about you. And the morning came on schedule carrying a fresh supply of hours that had not yet been touched by anyone's failure or success. Tomorrow's hours are waiting for you in exactly the same way, clean and unmarked and full of the particular kind of possibility that only exists before a day has been lived? For now, there is nothing to do with that knowledge except let it rest alongside you in the dark, a companion as reliable as your own breathing, as steadfast as the bed beneath your body. There is a version of you that almost nobody knows, a self so carefully hidden that there are days when even you forget it exists beneath all the layers of competence and reliability you have wrapped around it. It lives behind the organized one, the calm person who always has a plan and never seems to falter under the weight of the 1,000 plans they are carrying simultaneously. This hidden self is not weak exactly, but it is softer than the version you show the world, more uncertain, more in need of reassurance than the outer shell would ever suggest, more hungry for the kind of patient, unconditional care that it has been spending all its energy giving to everyone else. You have built such an impressive fortress of capability around this tender part of yourself that it has become nearly invisible, buried under layer after layer of efficiency, responsibility, and the quiet, constant message that you don't need help, that you've got this, that you can handle whatever comes your way without anyone needing to worry about you. People believe this message because you deliver it so convincingly, with such practiced ease that it looks not like a performance but like the simple, unadorned truth of who you are. They lean on you because you have taught them over many years to lean, and they do not look behind the strength for the vulnerability it conceals, because you have given them no reason to suspect it is there. But it is there, and it has always been there, patient and undemanding, this quieter self, watching from behind the curtain of your competence with eyes that are more tired than anyone realizes. It is the part of you that wanted to cry when things got overwhelming but didn't, because the capable one does not cry when things get hard. It is the part that wanted to say, honestly and without shame, that this is too much for one person to carry, but couldn't form those words because saying them would crack the carefully maintained surface, and who knows what would flood through the cracks once they started to form, what years of suppressed need might come pouring out. It is the part that lies awake at night, not planning for tomorrow the way the competent self plans, but simply feeling the enormous weight of having been strong for so long, wondering in a voice almost too quiet to hear how much longer the performance can last before the performer finally runs out of the energy that has been fueling it all these years. You have heard this voice in moments of extreme tiredness or rare solitude, and you have silenced it each time, not cruelly, but with practiced efficiency, the way you silence all disruptions to the smooth functioning of your carefully managed world. There is a cost to this silencing that accumulates in places you cannot easily see, a toll that is paid not in any single dramatic moment, but in the slow erosion of something vital, something you might call aliveness or authenticity, or simply the ordinary pleasure of being known by the people who share your days. When you hide the tender self so thoroughly that even you forget it is there, you lose access to something essential, the capacity to be touched by your own experience, to feel the full texture of your life rather than just managing its logistics. The competent self is magnificent at keeping things running, but it does not know how to be moved, does not know how to receive comfort, does not know how to sit quietly in the presence of its own sadness without immediately reaching for a solution or a distraction or a task that needs completing. This hidden self is not your weakness, though every instinct you have may insist otherwise. It is actually your most authentic face, the one you wore before the world taught you that vulnerability was something to be managed rather than expressed, before experience demonstrated in painful detail that people who admit to struggling are sometimes treated with less respect than people who pretend they are fine. You learned this lesson early, absorbed it the way children absorb the really important things, not from direct instruction but from observation, from watching who gets praised and who gets overlooked, who gets promoted and who gets gently sidelined. So you chose strength, or perhaps strength chose you the way a river chooses its course, following the path of least resistance due the landscape of your earliest experiences and the expectations that surrounded them. Over time, the choice became a habit you no longer noticed. The habit became an identity you no longer questioned. The identity became so rigid and so thoroughly reinforced by the gratitude and reliance of everyone around you that the softer self underneath had no room to breathe, no permission to surface or opening through which it could express its existence without threatening the whole elaborate structure that had been built on top of it. Here in the dark, where performance is pointless and the audience has gone home, that folded-up self can begin to unfurl a little. Not old at once, not with any dramatic revelation that would alarm the competent one still standing guard at the gates of your composure, but gently, the way a fern uncurls in the first warmth of a new season, slowly and with the particular grace of something returning to a shape it never should have been forced to leave behind. You do not need to make any announcements about your vulnerability or confess your tiredness to anyone who has not earned the right to receive such a precious confession. Tonight, it is enough to simply acknowledge this part of yourself to yourself, to look at it with the same care and attention you so generously lavish on everyone else's needs and so rarely turn inward. When was the last time you asked yourself, with genuine curiosity and without rushing past the answer, how you are actually doing? Not the reflexive fine that you deploy like a shield against further inquiry, but a real, patient, honest check-in with the self that lives beneath the capable surface, the self that keeps the whole operation running but is never, itself, asked how the running is going. If you were to ask that self right now, in the safety of the dark where no one else can hear the answer, what do you think it might say? Perhaps it would say that it is tired in ways that the word tired cannot fully capture, a weariness that has been accumulating like sediment at the bottom of a river, layer upon layer of days when it gave more than it received, held more than it was held, stood firm more than it was allowed to lean. It might say that it misses being taken care of, that somewhere beneath the layers of independence and capability there is a longing to be the one who is looked after for once, the one whose needs are anticipated with the same care it has been spending years anticipating everyone else's. Or it might say something about the loneliness of competence, the particular isolation that comes from being so reliably strong that people stop offering help, not because they are unkind but because they genuinely believe you don't need it, because you have been so convincing in your performance of self-sufficiency that even the people who love you most take it at face value. This isolation is one of the cruelest consequences of the mask, because it is self-reinforcing. The more capable you appear, the less support is offered, and with less support offered, the more you must rely on yourself alone. And this deepening self-reliance only makes you appear more capable, until the circle closes completely and you are standing at the center of a strength that has become its own kind of quiet, beautiful, devastating prison. Tonight, you do not need to dismantle those walls or break free from the pattern in any dramatic way. But you can sit with the one who lives inside, the tender and tired self that has been waiting patiently behind the fortress of your competence, and offer it the simplest thing, the thing it has been asking for without words for longer than you realize. Not a plan or a strategy or a solution, just acknowledgement, just the quiet, profound act of saying, "I see you. I know you have been carrying all of this for a very long time. I know you are tired, and I am sorry I have been so busy holding everything else that I forgot to hold you." Let those words settle into the space between your ribs, into the places where the hidden self has been quietly aching for recognition. Let them be enough for tonight, because they are enough, because the simple act of being seen, even if only by yourself, is one of the most healing things a person can experience. The recognition does not need to be dramatic or transformative to matter. It does not need to change everything about how you operate in the morning or how you present yourself to the world. It simply needs to happen, quietly, in the privacy of this moment, the way the most important things in life tend to happen, without fanfare or an audience, without anyone keeping track of whether the moment was significant enough to count. The world outside will still expect the competent one in the morning, and you will step back into that role with the same skill and dedication you have always brought to it. But something will be different, some small thing that only you will notice, a tenderness toward yourself that was not there before, a willingness to hold your own tiredness with the same gentle hands you use to hold everyone else's. You are both of these people, the strong one and the soft one, the holder and the one who needs holding. You have always been both. Tonight, let them coexist without competition or hierarchy, without one needing to be hidden so the other can function. Let the strong one rest and let the soft one surface, two halves of a whole that has been artificially divided for far too long. The bed can hold them both. The night has room for both. Your hands, finally still, finally open, can hold them both. Feel the way the two souls settle into one another now, the way the strong one softens when it no longer has to pretend that softness is a threat, how the tender one steadies when it no longer has to hide its existence behind layers of competence. They have been living in separate rooms of the same house for so long, the strong one facing outward toward the world and the soft one turned inward toward the shadows, and neither one has been able to rest because the division itself was exhausting, the constant effort of maintaining the boundary between what you show and what you conceal, draining resources that could have been spent on simply being whole. The reunion of these two selves is not something that happens in a single night or can be accomplished through any act of will. It is something that begins in moments like this one, in the quiet acknowledgement that both parts of you are real, both are necessary, and neither one needs to be suppressed in order for the other to survive. So let the night hold both versions of you, the competent manager who will return to service in the morning and the tired, tender person who has been waiting so long for permission to rest without pretending that rest is not what they desperately need. Let the pillow support the head that has been thinking so hard all day, and let it also support the head that has been aching with the effort of not showing how hard the thinking really was. The darkness makes no distinction between strength and vulnerability. It wraps itself around both with equal gentleness, asking nothing, judging nothing, simply present and available and vast enough to contain everything you are without requiring you to be only one thing at a time. In the morning, the world will ask you to choose again, to put on one face and set the other aside, but the night makes no such demand. The night is generous in a way the day has never learned to be, offering its shelter to the whole of you without asking you to trim or edit or present a curated version of yourself. Take that generosity while it lasts. Breathe it in the way you breathe the cool air of a room that has been waiting all day for you to return and rest in it. Let it fill the spaces that competence has been occupying, the corners of your being that have been furnished with productivity and efficiency but have never been allowed to simply sit empty, unfurnished, and open and free. There is a gesture that says more about the human relationship to control than any book could articulate, more than centuries of careful philosophical thought about attachment and freedom have managed to express. It is the difference between a clenched fist and an open palm, two positions of the same hand that contain entirely different worldviews, entirely different relationships to everything they encounter. The fist says, "I will hold this and never let it go. I will grip tightly enough to prevent loss, to stop the world from taking what I have decided belongs to me." An open palm says something braver and more difficult to learn, something that the fist cannot quite hear because the sound of its own clenching fills all the available silence. The open palm says, "I receive what comes and release what goes." It does not say this with indifference or the cold detachment of someone who has stopped caring whether things turn out well or badly. It says it with the full awareness that what comes may be beautiful and what goes may be precious, and that the natural flow of receiving and releasing is not a loss to be prevented, but a rhythm to be trusted, the way you trust the rhythm of your own breathing without worrying that the exhale is stealing something the inhale just provided. The open hand understands that holding and releasing are not opposites but partners, two movements in the same dance, each one giving meaning to the other the way silence gives meaning to music, and space gives meaning to the objects that occupy it. This is not passivity, though it may look that way to anyone who has only known the language of the fist. This is perhaps the most active and courageous stance a person can take toward their own life, a willingness to remain open to the full current of experience, to feel whatever arrives rather than armoring yourself in advance against the possibility of being hurt by it. You have spent so much of your life with closed fists, holding tightly to relationships, outcomes, plans, and the particular shape you believe your life should take at each stage. There's nothing wrong with caring deeply about these things. Nothing wrong with caring deeply about these things. Nothing wrong with wanting them to endure and flourish. Caring is not the problem, has never been the problem. The problem is the belief that caring requires clenching, that love must take the form of a grip, that responsibility means never allowing your fingers to open even slightly. This belief has turned your caring into a kind of suffering, because a hand that is always clenched can never receive anything new, and a heart that is always bracing for loss is a heart that cannot fully feel the warmth of what is present right now, right here in this very moment. Consider how you hold the people you love, not physically but emotionally, the way you try to manage their happiness, anticipate their needs before they have even identified those needs themselves. Prevent them from experiencing the discomfort and failure that you have decided are your job to intercept. This kind of holding comes from genuine love, from a deep and tireless concern for their well-being. But it carries a shadow that the love itself cannot see, the unspoken belief that the people you care about are not strong enough to handle their own lives without your constant intervention, that without your protective grip they would stumble into harm you could have prevented. Your love for them is not in question, has never been in question, will never be diminished by the simple act of loosening the grip through which it has been expressed for so long. What is in question is whether the form of the love, all that clenching and controlling worry, is serving the people it is meant to protect or simply adding the weight of your anxiety to the load they are already carrying on their own. There is a subtle sorrow woven into this kind of protective holding, a grief that hides inside the very act of caring so fiercely. It is the sorrow of never being fully present with the people you love, because part of your attention is always deployed ahead of the moment, scanning for the danger that has not yet materialized, rehearsing the intervention you hope will never be necessary. The present moment, with all its warmth and laughter and imperfect beauty, passes through your fingers while your grip is occupied elsewhere, securing a future that may never unfold the way the anxious mind insists it will. You miss the sound of their laughter because you are listening for the sound of something breaking. You miss the warmth of their company because you are busy building walls around it to keep the cold out. But suffering is not something you can prevent in another person's life, no matter how tightly you hold on or how carefully you watch over them. People will struggle and stumble and hurt and grieve whether you are standing guard or not, because these experiences are not malfunctions to be fixed, but fundamental features of what it means to be alive, as essential to growth as rain is essential to a garden. Your grip, however loving its intention, cannot absorb the shocks that are meant for someone else's learning. It can only exhaust you, adding your suffering to the total, without reducing theirs by any measurable amount. The open hand does not abandon the people it loves or withdraw its care. It holds them differently, with a grip that knows intuitively when to tighten and when to release, that offers support without smothering, that communicates both presence and trust in the same gesture. This kind of holding requires a strength that the clenched fist simply does not possess, because the fist draws its strength from fear, while the open hand draws its strength from something deeper and more durable, a trust in the basic capacity of life to unfold in ways that serve even when they sting. Think of the way a tree holds its leaves in autumn. It does not clench its branches desperately when the wind arrives, fighting to prevent the inevitable release. It holds them for their season, nourishes them through the green months, and then lets them go. Not because it doesn't value them, but because it understands that releasing is part of the cycle that makes the next season of growth possible. The bare branches of winter are not a failure of holding, but a preparation for the abundance of spring, an emptying that makes room for what comes next. The tree does not grieve each falling leaf as a loss, but accepts it as a necessary part of the larger rhythm that sustains its life across the years, trusting the cycle even when the branches look bare and the ground beneath is covered with the evidence of everything that has been released. In that trust, there is a kind of grace that no amount of clenching could produce, a beauty that comes precisely from the willingness to let the season do what seasons do, which is to change, to move through their cycle without permission from anyone who might prefer that summer lasted forever. You can learn from this, not tonight and not all at once, but gradually, the way anyone learns a language they were not raised speaking, by listening before attempting to speak, by observing before practicing, by letting the unfamiliar sounds become familiar through patient exposure. The language of the open hand is not one you were taught early in life. You were taught the language of the fist instead, the vocabulary of control and prevention and constant alertness. Learning a new way of holding does not require you to forget the old one. It simply adds another option for the moments when the grip is causing more pain than the letting go could. Tonight, as you lie here with your hands resting open or softly curled, consider what it would feel like to hold your life the way you might hold water in your cupped palms. Not gripping, because water cannot be gripped and the attempt only forces it out faster. Cupping gently, with fingers slightly apart, allowing the water to pool in the natural bowl of your hands while accepting that some will trickle through, that the holding is temporary, that the water was always moving and you are simply giving it a place to rest for a moment before it continues. This is not resignation. This is the deepest form of engagement with life as it actually is, rather than life as the gripping mind insists it should be. When you hold things loosely, you feel them more completely, more honestly, more aware of their texture and their temperature and the particular way they sit in the palm of your hand. When your hands are soft, they are more sensitive, more alive to the warmth of what they hold. The clenched fist, for all its apparent power, is actually numb, so focused on maintaining its grip that it has forgotten what it is holding and why it started holding in the first place. It is a devastating irony when you see it clearly. The very act of trying to preserve something through force destroys the ability to experience it. The way a collector who locks a beautiful painting in a dark vault has technically preserved it but has also made it invisible, unreachable, cut off from the very eyes that loved it enough to want to keep it safe. There is a teaching found in many traditions across cultures and centuries that says we suffer not because of what happens to us, but because of our attachment to how we think things should be. The distance between what is and what we believe should be is the breeding ground for almost all of our pain, and it is in that gap that the clenching occurs. When we allow what is to simply be what it is, without demanding that it match the image we have been gripping so tightly, the clenching stops naturally, not because we have forced it to stop, but because there is simply nothing left to grip. Let your hands be open tonight. Let them receive the darkness and the quiet. You do not need to grip sleep when it comes. Simply leave your hands open and let it arrive on its own time, the way it always has, not because you seized it, but because you finally stopped trying to manage its approach. Feel how the open hand changes your relationship to the darkness around you, transforming the night from something to be endured into something to be received. When your fingers are curled, the darkness feels like something pressing in, another weight to be managed, another problem to be solved. When your fingers are open, the darkness becomes a gift, a warm and weightless offering that asks nothing in return and gives everything it has, which is space, which is silence, which is the rare and precious absence of demand. The open hand does not need to understand the darkness or control it or manage its passage. It simply rests in it the way a boat rests on water, supported by the very element it floats upon, going nowhere and needing to go nowhere. This is what the fist has been refusing all along, not the darkness itself, but the experience of being held by something it cannot see or measure or control. The fist wants guarantees. The open hand is willing to proceed without them, trusting that the surface will hold, that the water will support, that the night will carry you through to morning the way it has carried every living creature through every night since the beginning of time. This trust is not naive or foolish. It is the deepest kind of intelligence, the wisdom that recognizes what can be controlled and what cannot, and chooses to stop wasting its precious energy on the difference. Let the open hand be your teacher in these quiet hours, and let it show you what the fist could never demonstrate, that there is more strength in softness than in clenching, more courage in releasing than in holding, and more peace in the open palm than the closed fist has ever been able to contain. There is something almost absurd about the way control works, or rather, about the way it consistently fails to work when you need it most. Grip too tightly and things slip through your fingers, like sand or water or any of the countless things in this world that cannot be held by force alone. Try desperately to hold your life in one fixed position, and the more chaotic it feels, because the effort of controlling introduces its own chaos, its own friction and turbulence, into a system that might otherwise flow with surprising ease if you simply let it. The harder you work to prevent failure, the more exhausted you become, until the exhaustion itself becomes a new source of the very failures you were trying to prevent. Every missed detail, every short-tempered reply, the declining quality of attention that comes from a mind running at full capacity for too long without rest. These are not signs that you need to grip harder, but evidence that the gripping itself has become the problem. This is the paradox that lives at the heart of every clenched fist. The quiet cosmic irony that the gripping mind refuses to acknowledge, because doing so would mean admitting that the entire enterprise of total control has been not just futile, but actively counterproductive from the very beginning. You have probably noticed this pattern in your own life, even if you have never stopped to give it a name or examine the mechanics that drive it. The more carefully you plan a gathering, the more anxious you become about whether everyone is comfortable and happy, and the less you enjoy it yourself, becoming less present to the actual warmth and laughter and connection happening around you. Similarly, when you meticulously manage a project, hovering over every detail, and the more resentful and constrained your collaborators become, until the very control that was meant to improve the outcome begins to undermine it from within. The more tightly you hold a relationship, monitoring its health with the anxious vigilance of a doctor over a patient in intensive care, the more stifled the other person feels, until the very grip that was meant to keep them close begins, slowly and imperceptibly, to push them toward the door. This is not because you are doing something wrong in the way the word wrong usually implies. It is because control, by its very nature, introduces rigidity into systems that function best when they are allowed to be fluid, to bend and breathe and find their own equilibrium without being forced into a predetermined shape. Life, in all its messy and surprising glory, is a flowing thing, a river that moves and shifts and finds its own way around obstacles without needing to be directed or managed. When you try to hold the river in place, to dam it or freeze it into a shape you find acceptable, you are fighting against a force that is vastly larger and more patient than you could ever be, a force that has been flowing since long before there were hands to try to hold it. The river does not resist you out of malice or indifference. It simply follows the laws that have governed its movement since water first found its way downhill, and those laws do not make exceptions for good intentions or careful planning. Think about the areas of your life where things have worked out best, where the results exceeded your expectations and the experience left you genuinely, memorably happy. Were those the times when you gripped most tightly, when every detail was managed and every contingency planned for in advance? Or were they the times when something unexpected happened, when the plan fell apart in some crucial way and you were forced to improvise, when you let go of the script and discovered that what emerged from the wreckage was richer and more interesting and more alive than anything you could have orchestrated? The moments we remember most fondly are often the unplanned ones, the detours and the happy accidents that no amount of management could have produced or predicted. This is because spontaneity requires open hands, and open hands can catch what clenched fists cannot. An unplanned joy, a fortunate encounter that changes the direction of a conversation or a day, these things cannot be gripped into existence. They can only be received, and receiving requires the very openness that control has been working so hard to prevent. There is a rich irony in this that is worth savoring tonight as you lie in the dark. What you most want, that deep peace in the sense that everything is going to be all right, these are precisely the things that flee from the gripping hand and settle quietly into the open one. Peace cannot be manufactured through vigilance. Security cannot be built entirely through control. The deep sense of okayness you crave is not a product of perfect management, but a natural state that emerges when management is finally, carefully set aside. You may have experienced this in moments so brief and so contrary to your usual way of operating that you dismissed them as flukes rather than recognizing them as evidence of a deeper pattern. A day when all your plans collapsed and what replaced them was better than anything you had organized. An evening when the ambitious meal you were preparing went wrong and you ended up eating something simple and imperfect while laughing at the absurdity of the failure with someone you care about. A moment on a walk or in the shower when your mind simply stopped planning, and in that gap, a clarity appeared that all your careful thinking had never been able to produce. These are not flukes, but small windows into a different way of being, brief glimpses of what your life feels like when the grip relaxes and the current is allowed to carry you rather than being fought at every turn. There is a deeper layer to this paradox that is worth exploring in the gentle safety of the dark. The desire for control is itself a form of suffering, because it sets you permanently at odds with the way things actually are. Reality does not hold still. It shifts and changes and surprises with the calm indifference of weather, paying no attention whatsoever to the elaborate forecasts you have prepared. When you insist that reality conform to your plans, you are placing yourself in a permanent state of friction with the world, a tension that wears you down not through any single dramatic conflict, but through the slow, grinding, daily abrasion of expecting one thing and getting another, over and over again, year after year. What hurts is not the unexpected things themselves, which are often neutral and sometimes even wonderful when you stop fighting them long enough to see them clearly. Rather, the suffering lives in the gap between what your gripping mind demanded and what reality actually delivered, and the exhaustion of constantly measuring the distance between the two and trying, desperately and without success, to close it through sheer force of will. That gap never closes, because reality keeps moving, keeps shifting, keeps presenting new configurations that your plans did not anticipate, and the mind keeps recalculating, keeps adjusting, keeps clenching tighter in the hope that more effort will finally bring the world into alignment with the blueprint it drew up in advance. When you look at this pattern from the outside, in the quiet clarity of the night, you can see how much energy the friction consumes, how much of your daily exhaustion comes not from the events of your life, but from your resistance to those events, your insistence that they should have unfolded differently than they did. So much of what you call being tired is actually the fatigue of fighting, not against any external enemy, but against the basic nature of reality itself, which is fluid, unpredictable, and gloriously indifferent to the careful blueprints you drew up in advance. These moments of unexpected grace are not flukes. They are small demonstrations of the paradox at work, quiet proof that loosening produces more than tightening ever could, not because the universe is rewarding your surrender with a prize, but because letting go removes the very obstacle that was blocking what you wanted. Your grip was the dam, and the river has been waiting patiently behind it. This paradox extends to sleep itself. which is perhaps why you are here tonight, listening to these words while your body grows heavier and your thoughts grow softer. Sleep cannot be forced, as everyone who has ever lain awake at 3 in the morning, desperately willing themselves to rest, knows with painful intimacy. The harder you try to sleep, the more awake you become, caught in the cruel trap of a consciousness that intensifies in direct proportion to the effort spent trying to shut it down. Sleep comes only when you stop trying to make it come, when you let go of the outcome and simply lie in the darkness with your hands open and your mind unoccupied by the project of its own shutdown. This is the teaching that every night offers, the practice run for letting go that the darkness provides free of charge to anyone willing to receive it. Every night is a small death of the waking self, a dissolution of the controlling mind into something larger and gentler and more trusting than the daytime version of you would ever voluntarily become. Every morning is a small resurrection, bringing you back to the world of effort and management and careful calculation, but one that is nourished by the hours of surrender that preceded it. The rhythm between the two, the gripping of the day and the releasing of the night, is not a problem to be solved, but a pulse to be felt, the steady beating of a life that needs both tension and release the way music needs both sound and silence. So consider tonight a gentle experiment, the kind with no hypothesis to prove and no conclusion that needs to be drawn before morning. You have nothing to lose and no audience to impress. If sleep comes, let it carry you wherever it wishes to go. If it waits a while longer, you are still resting, still giving your body the gift of stillness, still offering yourself the rare luxury of hours without purpose. Either way, you are practicing something valuable, the unfamiliar act of loosening your grip on the outcome and allowing what happens next to simply happen, trusting that what happens will be sufficient, that the night will do its work regardless of whether you supervise the process. Let your breath carry you now. It knows what to do and has always known, since the moment you first drew air. Trust this rhythm the way you trust the ground to hold you, when you walk, automatically and without the need for conscious effort. Let it carry you the way a gentle current carries a leaf, without resistance or direction, simply and beautifully onward. Notice how the breath slows as the body softens, how each exhale becomes a little longer and a little deeper as the paradox resolves itself in the most natural way possible, not through understanding but through surrender. You did not need to solve the paradox of letting go in order to experience it. You only needed to stop trying to solve it, to let the question dissolve into the same warm darkness that is dissolving the boundaries of your waking mind, carrying you gently toward the threshold where thought becomes dream and effort becomes rest. The answer to the paradox was never a thought at all. It was always a feeling, your body finding its own weight and your mind finding its own quiet in the generous and undemanding dark. Let this feeling deepen now, spreading through your chest like warmth from a fire that needs no tending, moving into your arms and your legs and the long, tired muscles of your back that have been supporting the architecture of your competence since morning. Let every cell receive the message that the paradox has delivered in its gentle, roundabout way, the message that less effort produces more rest, that loosening produces more than tightening, and that the most effective thing you can do right now is the exquisite, radical, deeply human act of doing absolutely nothing at all. You have been listening for a while now, and the words have been doing their quiet work, loosening the threads of tension that were woven so tightly through your body and your mind when you first lay down tonight. Perhaps you can feel the difference already, a subtle shift in the way you are lying, a softness in places that were rigid when you first settled into this position. Perhaps the shift is still in progress, still dissolving, that will continue through the hours of sleep, the way a stream continues to smooth its stones even when there is no one watching, even when the work goes completely unobserved and unappreciated. Let us move now through the body one more time, not with the analytical attention of someone cataloging their tension points, but with the gentle wandering of someone strolling through a familiar garden in the evening, noticing what has changed since the last visit, pausing here and there to appreciate the small transformations that patience and time have produced. Begin wherever your attention naturally falls, wherever the body calls you first with its quiet whisper of remaining tension. There is no correct order for this kind of unwinding, no prescribed route that must be followed. Let the body guide you to the places that still need attending, the spots where the day's grip is holding on with the last of its determination. If your attention is drawn to your forehead, notice the subtle furrow that may still live between your brows, the remnant of 1,000 small concentrations throughout the day, 1,000 moments of frowning over problems or squinting at screens, or simply wearing the face of someone who is thinking very hard about how to keep everything from falling apart. Let it smooth now, not through effort, but through imagination, the skin of your forehead becoming wide and open, like a landscape blanketed in fresh snow, expansive and undisturbed and holding nothing but its own quiet stillness. The muscles around your eyes carry their own particular story of the day, a record written in tiny tensions of squinting at screens, scanning for problems, and maintaining the facial expression that communicates calm confidence to the people around you even when calm is the last thing you feel inside. These tiny muscles rarely get the chance to release fully because even in rest we often keep them partially engaged, holding the face in some approximation of its daytime performance. Give them complete permission now, and feel the way they soften when you stop performing entirely, when the face you show the world dissolves into the face that exists only here, in the dark, unguarded, and beautifully free. Your throat has been working harder than you realize, not just in the physical act of speaking, but in the more subtle and more exhausting labor of holding back the things you chose not to say. How many words did you swallow today? How many times did you catch the honest response rising in your chest and replace it with something more diplomatic, more careful, more appropriate for the version of yourself that you present to the world? That editing happens in the throat, and it leaves its mark in the tightness you may feel there now, a constriction that loosens only when you are truly alone, truly safe, truly free to be unedited and unperformed. Let the throat open, let the breath move through it without resistance, and feel the release travel downward into the chest, where the heart has been beating its faithful rhythm all day without once pausing to ask for gratitude or rest. Your heart does not need your management. It does not require your supervision or your planning or your anxious oversight of its performance. It simply beats, one contraction after another, in a rhythm that began before you were conscious and will continue through every moment of your sleep tonight. Of all the things you have been trying to control today, your heartbeat is the one that needs you least and teaches you most, a quiet demonstration that the most essential processes of your life have been running perfectly well without your interference all along. Feel the breath moving deeper now, past the chest and into the belly, that soft center that has been armored all day against the anticipated impacts of the world. Let the armor dissolve, layer by careful layer. Let the belly be soft and undefended, the way it is in deep sleep, returning to how it felt when you were very small and had not yet learned that the world sometimes asks you to brace against it. There is a particular kind of relief in letting the belly go, a release that is both physical and emotional, as though the muscles there were holding not just tension but something older and more tender, a grief you haven't had time to sit with, a sadness you have been too busy managing everything else to feel. Your hips and lower back carry the deep, structural weight of your holding, the tension that comes from being the foundation on which so much of your life is built. These muscles have been working since you first stood up this morning, maintaining the posture of someone who is reliable and in control. Let them release now into the mattress, surrendering the work of support to the surface beneath you. Feel the way it receives the weight of your body without complaint, the way the earth itself holds every mountain and every stone without once needing to be asked. There is something profoundly comforting about this surrender, something that reminds the body of its earliest experiences of being held, the time before language and responsibility, when the whole world was warmth and support in the slow rhythm of someone else's heartbeat against your tiny chest. Before you knew what it meant to be the strong one, before you understood that some people carry and others are carried, before the division between holding and being held had even entered your vocabulary, you lived in a world where being supported was simply what happened, automatically and without negotiation, the natural state of a small body in a large and generous world. Move your attention into your legs, those loyal pillars that have carried you from place to place without complaint throughout the day. Let them grow heavy now, sinking into the bed with the slow, pleasant weight of something that is finally being allowed to stop, to simply be still. You do not need to go anywhere tonight. The distance between this moment and morning can be crossed lying down, with your eyes closed and your body at peace. The legs have been carrying not just your physical weight, but the weight of your forward motion, that constant restless momentum of a life that rarely pauses long enough to notice the beauty of standing still. Let the momentum drain away now, the way a spinning wheel gradually slows when no one is pushing it, naturally and with a gentle inevitability that requires nothing from you except your willingness to stop pushing. The legs do not need to be ready to carry you anywhere tonight. The only journey remaining is the short, sweet passage from wakefulness into sleep, and that journey requires no walking, no muscular effort of any kind. Your feet, those complex and often neglected instruments, may be the last to release. They have been bearing your weight since morning, adjusting constantly to keep you balanced, performing thousands of micro-corrections throughout the day to keep you upright and stable, while your attention was occupied with everything except the remarkable work happening at the base of your body. Let them soften now, arches relaxing and toes uncurling, finding the shape they take only when the day's walking is truly done and the ground is no longer needed. Feel the way the release moves through the soles, a softening that has nowhere else to travel because it has reached the furthest boundary of your body, the boundary where you end and the world begins, pressed against floors and pavement and stairs all day without rest. As each part of your body releases, notice how the individual surrenders add up to something larger than any single letting go, something that feels less like relaxation and more like homecoming, like a return to a place you have been away from for too long. This is not the addition of something new to your body. This is the removal of everything that was added during the day, the peeling away of layers that were never truly part of you, but were applied by circumstance and habit, and the relentless demands of a life that asks so much and acknowledges so little. What remains when the layers are gone is the original softness that was always underneath the tension, waiting to be uncovered, the way a clear sky waits behind every cloud, patient and unchanged and utterly indifferent to the storms that temporarily obscure it. Let this process continue at whatever pace feels natural, without your management or your timeline. Some tension will release tonight, freely and gratefully, like a breath that has been held too long finally finding its way out of the body. Other holdings may take longer to dissolve, having been embedded in the tissue by years of practice until they became part of the landscape of your body, as familiar as the lines on your palm and as difficult to separate from the self that has been shaped around them. This is not a problem to be solved or a failure to be corrected. It is simply the nature of deep holding, and patience with the process is its own form of release, its own quiet statement that you are willing to move at the speed of the body rather than the speed of the mind, which has always been too fast for its own good. Imagine that your body is becoming lighter, not by losing substance, but by shedding the weight that was never truly yours to carry, the accumulated burden of a day spent gripping, managing, and performing strength you may not have fully felt. What remains is the actual weight of you, which is so much gentler than the loaded version, so much kinder on the bed, so much more at ease in the world. Each breath carries away a little more of what does not belong, the way an outgoing tide carries away the debris that accumulated on the shore during the storms, leaving the sand clean and smooth and ready to receive whatever the next tide brings in. This lighter self is not a different person. It is you, essentially you, the one who exists beneath the roles and the relentless holding. It is the you that sleeps and dreams and wakes renewed, the you that existed before the first burden was picked up, and that will remain long after the last burden is finally set down. Welcome this self the way you would welcome someone you have missed for a long time, with warmth and the particular joy that comes from discovering they have been close by all along, just waiting for you to set something down so your arms would be free. Feel the way this essential self breathes differently from the loaded version, how its breath moves all the way down to the lowest part of the belly without meeting resistance, without encountering the armored muscles that the day's anxieties deployed. Feel how its heartbeat is slower, steadier, more content to simply maintain its ancient rhythm without the spikes of urgency that accompanied every stressful moment of the day. This is what your body was designed to feel like at rest, and the fact that it feels unfamiliar, even slightly strange, is a measure of how far from rest you have been living, how far the constant holding has carried you from the simple, animal pleasure of lying still in a warm place with nothing to do and nowhere to be. Let this unfamiliar ease become familiar again, even if only for tonight. Let the body remember what the mind has been too busy to teach it. That rest is not something you earn through sufficient suffering, but something that was always yours, a birthright that no amount of productivity or failure can revoke. The pillow beneath your head is not a reward for your accomplishments. The blanket across your body is not a prize for your vigilance. They are simply here, the way the night is simply here, offering themselves without conditions to anyone willing to receive them with open hands and a willingness to stop performing long enough to feel the genuine comfort they provide. Sleep is approaching now, and you may already feel its gentle presence at the edges of your awareness, a softening of the boundaries between wakefulness and something deeper, a blurring of the line that separates thought from dream. You do not need to welcome it formally or prepare for its arrival with any special effort. Sleep is not a guest that requires hosting or management. It is more like dusk, something that simply happens when the conditions are right, when the light has faded enough and the noise has quieted enough for the body to be still long enough for the darkness to do what it has always known how to do. Let your thoughts drift now. If they have not already begun to do so on their own, they may move in directions that surprise you, loosening from the orderly tracks of the day and wandering into the strange, tender territory that exists just before sleep claims you. Images may arise that seem disconnected from logic, fragments of memory and imagination mingling in the half-light of a mind that is letting go of its need to make sense of everything it encounters. This is not disorder or dysfunction or a sign that something is wrong. This is the mind returning to its natural state, the fluid, associative, beautifully unpredictable way of being that the waking hours discipline into linearity but that the night sets free. You've been holding your thoughts in careful order all day, arranging them into lists and plans and sequences of cause and effect, maintaining the elaborate mental architecture that keeps your world running with its customary smoothness. This organizing is its own form of gripping, a cognitive version of the clenched fist that tries to hold the world in a shape the mind finds manageable. Letting the thoughts wander is the equivalent of opening your hands at last, allowing the contents to scatter and settle wherever they will, trusting that what needs to be remembered will still be there in the morning and what needs to be released will dissolve into the warm, forgiving darkness of sleep. Nothing you let go of tonight will be truly lost. Your worries will be available tomorrow if you want them back, faithful as ever, lined up and waiting for you to pick them up again with those familiar, capable hands. Plans will still be standing where you left them. Every piece of elaborate mental architecture you have spent years constructing to manage your life will still be intact in the morning, ready for you to step back into the way you step into shoes that have been worn so long they have taken the exact shape of your feet. You are not dismantling anything permanent by resting for these few hours. You are simply taking your hands off the controls, the way a pilot engages the autopilot on a calm, clear flight, not because the plane doesn't need guidance, but because the plane doesn't need guidance, but because the pilot needs rest, and the plane is capable of holding its course through the darkness without constant supervision. There is a tenderness in this act of stepping back that the controlling mind rarely allows itself to feel, a vulnerability in admitting that the work can wait, that the world can turn without your hand on the wheel, that the people you love will continue breathing and living and making their choices whether you are watching over them or not. This tenderness is not something to be feared or pushed away. It is the feeling of arriving somewhere you have been trying to reach all day without knowing you were looking for it, the feeling of finally being allowed to stop, fully and without qualification, without the nagging suspicion that stopping is merely a pause before the next demand arrives. You have been moving toward this moment since the first exhausting hour of the morning, and now that you are here, lying in the dark with nothing to organize and no one to attend to, you can let the arrival wash over you like warm water, softening the muscles of your face and easing the tension in your hands and allowing the thoughts to loosen their careful formation and drift apart like clouds in a gentle, evening wind. The night is your autopilot, and it has been carrying sleeping creatures through the dark hours since long before the first human lay down to rest, since long before consciousness itself learned to worry about what the morning would bring. Sleep is the oldest form of trust there is, the nightly act of faith that says the world will still be here when I open my eyes. Every morning arrives to keep that promise, and every sunrise fulfills the vow that the darkness made. You have made this journey from night to morning 1,000 times before, and each time you have arrived safely on the far shore of the dark, carried by a current older than memory, older than language, older than the first story ever told about what the night means and where it takes the ones who trust it enough to close their eyes. So trust it now, as you have trusted it every night of your life, even though most of those nights the trust was unconscious, offered automatically, the way a child trusts the ground beneath their feet without ever thinking about it. Tonight, make the trust deliberate, just for a moment. Feel the act of releasing your grip on the waking world and placing yourself in the care of something larger, something that has been doing this work since before there were words for rest or sleep or surrender. This is not weakness. This is the deepest wisdom the human body carries in its cells and bones and ancient, animal memory. Feel the heaviness settling into your limbs now, a warm and welcome weight that is fundamentally different from the heaviness of the day's burdens. This heaviness does not come from what you are carrying. It comes from what you are finally setting down, each burden released adding to the pleasant gravity that is pulling you deeper into the bed, deeper into the night, deeper into the place where holding is simply not necessary because there is nothing left that needs to be held. Your breath has found its own rhythm, slow and deep and steady, carrying on independently of your attention the way it always does when you stop directing it. Let it be the last sound you are aware of before the thoughts go quiet entirely, the gentle rise and fall that has accompanied you through every moment of your life, without ever asking for your management or your oversight. It does not judge the clenching of your daytime hours or measure the quality of your releasing in the night. It simply continues, faithful and undemanding, the one constant you have always been able to rely on without needing to grip it, the one companion that has never required your management or your oversight or your anxious supervision in order to show up, exactly as needed, for every single moment of your existence. The grip you carried into this night, the one that lived in your hands and your jaw and the vigilant corridors of your mind, has loosened, not because you fought it or argued it into submission, but because you gave it something it has been asking for without knowing how to ask. Permission to not be needed for a few hours, to rest alongside you rather than standing guard over you. Right now, you are not useful, and that is perfectly, beautifully, completely fine, not productive or efficient or managing anything at all in this moment. Simply a warm body in a soft bed, breathing slowly, thinking less, feeling the night fold itself around you the way water folds around a stone in a quiet stream. The stone does not try to hold the water. The water does not try to hold the stone. They simply exist together, each shaped by the other's presence, each held in place by nothing more than the gentle physics of what is. Tomorrow, the sun will rise and the day will present its familiar parade of demands, and your hands will reach for the threads of responsibility and your mind will begin its careful calculations. The grip will return, because the grip is not your enemy. It is a tool, one you have used well and will continue to use, and what you are learning is not to abandon it forever, but to set it down when the work is done, the way any craftsperson sets down their instrument at the end of the day, with respect for the tool and relief for the hand that held it. Sleep is the setting down. Sleep is the unclenched fist, the softened shoulder. It is the pause between one day's effort and the next day's renewal, silence between notes that gives the music its shape and its meaning. You are in that pause now, the soft and spacious nothing between what was and what will be, and there is nowhere else you need to go, nothing else you need to hold, no one else you need to be except the one who is lying here, breathing, resting, finally and gently and completely letting go. Your grip has loosened, hands are open, body warm and heavy and at peace, and mind grown soft enough to let the edges blur, to let the thoughts dissolve into the darkness without resistance or fear. The night is here, settled around you the way it settles around every sleeping creature on this side of the earth, and it is more than enough. Let the last thought dissolve the way mist dissolves when the air grows warm, quiet, and slow, leaving behind only the warmth of the bed and the deep, old, animal knowledge that sleep is safe, that rest is deserved, that letting go is not falling but floating, and that the morning will find you as it always has, gently and without needing to be asked. Rest now. The world will hold itself tonight, the way it always has and always will, and you are free to stop carrying, to simply close your eyes and let the night do what it has always done so well, which is to carry you softly and safely and patiently to the other side. The letting go does not need a name or a ceremony or a moment of conscious decision. It happens the way sleep happens, gradually and then all at once, a crossing from one state to another that the waking mind cannot quite track because the tracking itself is part of what gets released. One moment you are here, listening, feeling the weight of your body on the bed and the gentle rhythm of your breath in the quiet room. The next moment you are somewhere else entirely, carried by a current that has been waiting all evening for you to stop swimming against it and simply let it take you where you need to go. That current is here now, patient and warm, flowing beneath the surface of your awareness the way underground rivers flow beneath the fields, invisible but always present, always moving towards something vast and open and deeply, beautifully still. It has been here all along, waiting for you to notice it, waiting for the grip to loosen enough for the current to be felt. Every night of your life it has been flowing in exactly this way, carrying you from the shore of waking to the deep waters of sleep, and every night you have trusted it, even when the trusting was unconscious, even when the letting go happened without your awareness or your permission. Tonight the trust is deliberate, and the letting go is gentle, and the current is warm, and there is nothing left to do but let it carry you onward into the quiet that has been waiting, patient as starlight, faithful as the turning of the earth, through this long and tender and beautifully ordinary night.